The sky cracked open on a Tuesday. It wasn't a metaphor, nor was it a poetic turn of phrase. It was a literal fracture, a jagged wound in the heavens that bled light, so alien it made the sun seem dim. The first reports came from the Midwest, where farmers looked up from their fields to see the impossible. A fleet of ships, black as obsidian and sharp as razors, descending through the rift. They moved with a precision that mocked gravity, their engines silent, their intent unmistakable. I was in New York when the news broke. The city, always a cacophony of life, fell eerily silent as screens lit up with images of the invasion. The president's voice, calm but strained, echoed through every device. "We are under attack. This is not a drill." The aliens called themselves the Zoryans. They didn't speak in words but in pulses of light and sound that our scientists quickly translated. Their message was simple: surrender or be annihilated. And then came the twist, the gut punch that turned fear into fury. They weren't alone. The Russians, our old adversaries, had thrown in their lot with the invaders. It was a betrayal that stung deeper than any alien threat. The first strikes hit our military bases. The Zoryans' weapons were unlike anything we'd ever seen. Beams of energy that disintegrated steel and flesh alike, drones that moved like swarms of locusts, and shields that deflected even our most advanced missiles. But it wasn't just their technology that unnerved us. It was their strategy. They didn't just aim to conquer. They aimed to humiliate, to break us from the inside out. But if history had taught us anything, it was this: humanity doesn't break. We bend, we adapt, and when pushed to the brink, we fight back with a ferocity that defies logic. The first glimmers of resistance came from the unlikeliest places. A group of hackers in Chicago managed to infiltrate the Zoryans' communication network, feeding them false data and buying our forces precious time. In Texas, a retired engineer rigged an EMP device that took down an entire fleet of drones. And in the heart of Washington, a young scientist named Dr. Elena Vasquez discovered a weakness in the Zoryan shields, a frequency, almost imperceptible, that could disrupt their energy fields. The turning point came when the Zoryans made their first mistake. They underestimated us. They saw a fractured world, divided by politics and greed, and assumed we couldn't unite. But they didn't understand the resilience of the human spirit, the way we rally when faced with extinction. Cities that had once been rivals became allies. Nations that had been at odds for decades set aside their differences. And in the face of annihilation, humanity found its greatest strength: each other. The battle for Earth had begun, and it was a battle we refused to lose. The winds over Antarctica howled like a dying beast, carrying shards of ice that cut through the air like knives. Once a desolate expanse of frozen silence, the continent was now alive with chaos. The Zoryans had chosen this place for their base of operations, carving a fortress into the glacial depths that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Their structures shimmered with an otherworldly sheen, black and angular, pulsating with veins of blue light that hinted at the alien energy coursing through them. It was here, at the bottom of the world, that humanity had decided to make its stand. The battle had just begun. I stood on the deck of the USS Resolute, an aircraft carrier retrofitted for Arctic conditions, watching as waves of drones swarmed across the horizon like a living storm. The Zoryans moved with an eerie precision, their machines gliding through the air in perfect synchronicity. Behind me, jets roared off the carrier's runway, their afterburners glowing like fireflies against the icy expanse. The air smelled of fuel and ozone, a bitter reminder that humanity was throwing everything it had into this fight. "Incoming," someone shouted over the comms. I turned just in time to see a beam of searing energy lance down from the sky, striking one of our destroyers. The ship erupted in a ball of flame and twisted metal, its remains sinking into the frigid waters within seconds. The crew didn't even have time to scream. "Keep firing," barked Admiral Harker, his voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. He was an old warhorse, his face weathered and scarred from battles long past, but his eyes burned with a determination that refused to waver. We didn't come all this way to die quietly. Our forces responded with everything they had. Railguns mounted on the carrier's deck spat tungsten slugs at hypersonic speeds, ripping through the Zoryan drones with brutal efficiency. Anti-aircraft cannons filled the sky with tracer fire, creating a latticework of destruction that lit up the darkened horizon. And then there were the missiles, hundreds of them streaking toward the alien fortress like vengeful comets. But it wasn't enough. The Zoryan shields shimmered as our weapons struck them, absorbing the impacts with an almost mocking ease. Their counterattack was swift and devastating. More energy beams rained down from their ships, carving through our ranks with surgical precision. Tanks exploded in fiery blossoms on the ice. Soldiers were vaporized before they could even raise their weapons, and our aircraft fell from the sky like wounded birds. And yet we fought on. On the ground, teams of special forces advanced across the frozen wasteland toward the alien base. They moved in tight formations, their movements choreographed to perfection despite the chaos around them. Each soldier carried experimental weaponry designed specifically for this mission. Plasma rifles reverse-engineered from captured Zoryan tech, EMP grenades capable of disabling their drones, and exoskeletons that enhance strength and agility. Leading one of these teams was Captain Sarah Monroe, a legend among her peers, and one of the few people who had faced a Zoryan in hand-to-hand combat, and lived to tell about it. Her voice crackled over my headset as she relayed orders to her squad. "Stay low. Use the eyes for cover," she commanded as they dodged incoming fire. "We need to get close enough to plant these charges, or this whole mission is a bust." Monroe's team wasn't alone. Across Antarctica's icy plains, similar squads were converging on the alien fortress from all directions. It was a coordinated assault unlike anything humanity had ever attempted, a desperate gamble against an enemy that seemed invincible. Meanwhile, high above us in orbit, humanity's last hope hung in silence. The Aegis, an experimental space station armed with a weapon so powerful it had never been tested on Earth for fear it might obliterate everything in its path. Dubbed the Hammer, it was a particle cannon capable of delivering enough energy to crack open mountains, or alien fortresses buried beneath miles of ice. But activating the Hammer required precision targeting from ground forces, a task made infinitely more difficult by the Zoryans' interference signals and relentless attacks. "Admiral," came a voice over my comms, Dr. Elena Vasquez herself, speaking from the Aegis. "We're ready to fire on your command, but we need those targeting beacons online. If we miss, well, let's just say we can't afford to miss." I glanced at Harker. His jaw tightened as he processed her words. "You heard her," he growled into his mic. "All units, protect those beacon teams at all costs. We're not leaving this ice cube until we've sent those bastards back to whatever hell they came from." As if on cue, another wave of drones descended upon us, larger this time, their weapons glowing with an ominous red light that made my stomach churn. They weren't just attacking, they were testing us, probing our defenses for weaknesses. But we weren't about to give them any satisfaction. "Focus fire," Harker roared as more missiles launched from our ships and ground installations alike. And then something extraordinary happened, something that sent chills down my spine despite Antarctica's sub-zero temperatures. From behind our lines came reinforcements, not soldiers or tanks but civilians. Miners wielding industrial lasers repurposed as weapons. Engineers piloting modified construction mechs armed with makeshift flamethrowers. Even fishermen using harpoons rigged with explosives. They weren't trained fighters. They were ordinary people who refused to stand by while their world burned. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was human. And for perhaps the first time since this war began, I felt hope. Because if there was one thing history had taught us, one lesson etched into every scar humanity bore, it was this: we don't stop fighting. Not until we win. The war had driven us underground. Literally. What began as a desperate retreat into the icy depths of Antarctica had turned into something far stranger, something that defied all logic and science. The Zoryans, with their superior technology and unrelenting assault, had forced humanity to seek refuge in places we'd never dared to explore. But what we found beneath the Earth's crust wasn't just a hiding place. It was a revelation. It started with the collapse of an ice shelf during one of the Zoryans' orbital bombardments. The explosion tore open a chasm that plunged deeper than any known geological feature. Recon drones sent into the void transmitted images that left scientists and military leaders alike speechless. Vast caverns stretching for miles, illuminated by an eerie, diffuse light that seemed to emanate from nowhere. There were rivers, forests, even entire ecosystems thriving in this subterranean world, an impossible paradise hidden beneath the frozen wasteland. We called it Erebus, after the primordial darkness of Greek mythology. But as we descended deeper, it became clear that Erebus was no natural formation. The walls of the caverns bore markings, symbols, and patterns that hinted at an intelligence far older than humanity. Structures resembling temples and towers rose from the cavern floors, their architecture alien, yet strangely familiar. And then there was the light, a faint, golden glow that pulsed like a heartbeat, emanating from what appeared to be a miniature sun suspended in the cavern's center. The Zoryans had known about this place all along. Their Antarctic base wasn't just a strategic outpost. It was a gateway to Erebus. Whatever secrets lay hidden here, they wanted them badly enough to risk everything, including open war with humanity. Our forces regrouped within Erebus, using its natural formations as cover from Zoryan scans and attacks. It was here that we discovered the true scale of the Zoryans' ambition and their vulnerability. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had already become a legend for her work on disrupting Zoryan shields, led the research team exploring Erebus. What they found changed everything. "This isn't just a hollow earth," she said during one of our briefings, her voice trembling with equal parts excitement and dread. "This is an archive." She showed us holographic projections of what her team had uncovered. Vast repositories of data encoded into crystalline structures embedded in the cavern walls. The symbols we'd seen weren't just decorations. They were a language, a record of knowledge left behind by an ancient civilization that predated humanity by millennia. "They called themselves the Eternum," Vasquez explained. "At least, that's the closest translation we can manage. They were explorers, scientists, maybe even gods in their own right. And they left this place as a kind of vault, a safeguard against extinction. The Eternum's technology was unlike anything we'd ever encountered, even surpassing the Zoryans. But it wasn't just technology they'd left behind. It was warnings." Vasquez played an audio recording, a series of tones and vibrations translated into human speech. "They came before us," she said grimly. "The Zoryans aren't invaders. They're scavengers. They've been searching for remnants of Eternum technology across countless worlds, using it to fuel their conquest." The implications were staggering. If we could unlock the secrets of Erebus, we might stand a chance against the Zoryans, not just in this war, but in ensuring humanity's survival for generations to come. But Erebus wasn't uninhabited. As our forces pushed deeper into the caverns, we encountered resistance, not from the Zoryans but from something else entirely. Creatures emerged from the shadows, towering beasts with bioluminescent skin and eyes that glowed like molten gold. They moved with terrifying speed and intelligence, attacking without hesitation, but retreating when overwhelmed. "They're guardians," Vasquez theorized after analyzing one of their fallen bodies, a strange amalgamation of organic tissue and machinery. The Eternum must have created them to protect this place. It became clear that Erebus wasn't just a sanctuary. It was a battlefield waiting to happen. The Zoryans launched their assault soon after, deploying ground troops and drones into Erebus in an attempt to seize control of its resources. What followed was a three-way war unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Soldiers fighting side by side with monstrous guardians against an alien enemy bent on domination. Captain Sarah Monroe led one of the key offensives during this phase of the war. Her team infiltrated a Zoryan command center deep within Erebus, using stolen Eternum technology to disable their defenses and turn their own weapons against them. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Monroe said during one of her rare moments of rest. "We're fighting for something bigger, for knowledge, for legacy." As weeks turned into months, humanity began to adapt to life in Erebus. Engineers built makeshift cities within its caverns, using Eternum designs to create sustainable habitats powered by geothermal energy. Scientists worked tirelessly to decode more of the Eternum archives, uncovering breakthroughs in medicine, energy production, and weaponry. But time was running out. The Zoryans were relentless, their forces growing stronger with each passing day as they brought reinforcements through their Antarctic gateway. And then there was the rift, a massive tear in space-time located at Erebus's core, which Vasquez believed was both the source of its inner sun and a potential doomsday device if activated improperly. "We have one chance," she said during our final briefing before what would become known as the Battle for Erebus. "If we can harness the rift's energy and channel it through Eternum technology, we can end this war." It was a plan born out of desperation, but desperation had always been humanity's greatest weapon. As I write these words from deep within Erebus's labyrinthine tunnels, I can hear the sounds of battle echoing through the caverns, explosions reverberating like thunderclaps, alien screams mingling with human shouts, and above it all, that pulsing golden light, the heartbeat of our planet's greatest secret, growing stronger with every passing moment. This isn't just about winning a war anymore. This is about proving that no matter how deep we're driven into darkness, humanity will always find its way back to the light. The cleansing of Russia from alien rule was a battle etched into the annals of history, a moment when humanity proved its resilience against both extraterrestrial invaders and the collaborators who had sold out their own kind. The Zoryans, those cold, calculating conquerors from beyond the stars, had chosen Russia as one of their strongholds on Earth. It was a calculated move. Russia's vast expanse, its strategic position, and its fractured political landscape made it an ideal site for alien domination. But what they hadn't accounted for was the indomitable spirit of those who refused to bow. The war in Russia was unlike any other theater of the global conflict. The Zoryans had entrenched themselves deep within the country, turning former Soviet-era bunkers and secret facilities into fortresses bristling with alien technology. Moscow itself became a symbol of despair, a city under the iron grip of alien overlords, its skies patrolled by Zoryan drones, and its streets echoing with the heavy tread of their biomechanical enforcers. The Kremlin, once a seat of power, had been hollowed out and transformed into a command center for the invaders. But even in the darkest corners of Russia, resistance burned like an unquenchable flame. It began with whispers in the shadows, small groups of partisans striking at alien supply lines and collaborators. These were ordinary people, farmers, factory workers, former soldiers who had refused to join the Zoryan-controlled military. They called themselves Volya, meaning will, and their motto was simple: for Earth, for freedom. At first, their efforts seemed futile. What could Molotov cocktails and stolen rifles do against plasma cannons and energy shields? But as the months dragged on, Volya grew bolder. They learned to adapt, to exploit weaknesses in Zoryan technology. They captured alien weapons and turned them against their oppressors. The turning point came when an underground research team led by Dr. Elena Vasquez uncovered something extraordinary beneath Siberia's frozen tundra, a hidden Eternum archive similar to the one in Erebus. This ancient repository contained not only knowledge but also weapons, artifacts left behind by Earth's ancient protectors that could counteract Zoryan technology. Among these was a device known as the Shatterer, capable of disrupting the energy fields that powered Zoryan shields and vehicles. Armed with this newfound advantage, humanity launched Operation Dawnfire, a coordinated assault to liberate Russia from alien control. It was a campaign that would test every ounce of human ingenuity and courage. The first target was Moscow. The city had become a fortress, its perimeter guarded by towering obelisks that emitted energy barriers impenetrable to conventional weapons. But Vasquez's team had devised a plan, using the Shatterer to disable the obelisks long enough for ground forces to breach the city. I was embedded with one of those ground units, a ragtag coalition of Russian partisans, NATO special forces, and even defectors from the Zoryan-controlled Russian military who had seen the light. Our mission was to storm Red Square and plant charges at the base of the largest obelisk, codenamed Oblivion Spire. It was a suicide mission on paper, but none of us cared. We knew what was at stake. The battle for Moscow was chaos incarnate. The sky burned with tracer fire as human jets clashed with Zoryan fighters in dogfights that left flaming wreckage raining down onto the streets below. On the ground, waves of infantry surged forward under cover of artillery fire. Human tanks rolling alongside captured Zoryan walkers that had been reprogrammed by resistance engineers. But it wasn't just soldiers fighting this war. Civilians joined the fray in droves. Men and women armed with whatever they could find. Hunting rifles, homemade explosives, even kitchen knives. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they refused to let their homeland remain enslaved. We reached Red Square after hours of brutal combat. The sight that greeted us was both awe-inspiring and horrifying. Oblivion's spire loomed above us like some malevolent god, its surface rippling with energy that seemed almost alive. Around it swarmed Zoryan enforcers, hulking machines that moved with terrifying speed and precision. "Cover me!" shouted Captain Sarah Monroe as she sprinted toward the spire with a satchel full of explosives. She'd become something of a legend during this war, a symbol of defiance against impossible odds. And seeing her charge headlong into danger inspired us all to follow. We fought like demons possessed, cutting down enforcers and drones as Monroe reached her target and planted the charges. Just as she turned to run back toward us, an energy beam struck her square in the chest. "No!" I screamed as she fell, but even as she lay dying, she smiled. "For Earth," she whispered before detonating the charges remotely. The explosion rocked Red Square, sending shockwaves through Moscow that shattered windows for miles around. Oblivion's spire collapsed in on itself with an ear-splitting roar, and with it fell the energy barriers protecting Moscow. It was the beginning of the end for Zoryan rule in Russia. With Moscow liberated, resistance movements across Russia rose up en masse. Cities that had been under alien control for years were freed one by one as humanity's forces swept across the country like wildfire. By the time we reached Siberia, the last bastion of Zoryan power, it was clear that their grip on Earth was slipping. The final battle took place at Kapustin Yar, a secretive military base long rumored to house extraterrestrial artifacts even before the Zoryans arrived. It was here that they'd made their last stand, using every weapon at their disposal to repel our advance. But we were no longer just fighting for survival. We were fighting for victory. When it was over, when Kapustin Yar lay in ruins and the last Zoryan ship fled Earth's atmosphere, I stood among my comrades on what remained of Russian soil and felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Russia had been cleansed, not just of alien rule but also of fear. And though we knew this war wasn't over, not yet, we also knew this: humanity would never again bow to any force that sought to enslave it. Not aliens. Not anyone. It began as whispers in the halls of power, a quiet resolve that grew into a thunderous roar. Humanity had endured the Zoryans' invasion, survived their attempts to subjugate and annihilate us, and now, with Earth free from their grasp, we turned our gaze outward. The scars of their occupation ran deep, cities reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and the haunting memory of those who had fallen. But humanity had always been a species that thrived on defiance. We were not content with survival. We demanded justice. And so, we prepared to take the fight to the stars. The years following the liberation of Earth were marked by an unprecedented era of unity and innovation. The knowledge gleaned from the Eternum archives in Erebus had propelled humanity into a technological renaissance. We reverse-engineered Zoryan technology and combined it with Eternum advancements to create weapons and ships that could rival anything in the galaxy. The United Earth Fleet was born, a coalition of nations and peoples united under one banner, driven by a singular purpose: to ensure that no alien force would ever threaten our home again. Leading this charge was Admiral Sarah Monroe. Her name, now etched into legend after her sacrifice in Moscow, had inspired Earth's liberation. Though she had fallen in battle, her legacy lived on through the fleet's flagship, the Monroe, a colossal warship bristling with weaponry and powered by an Eternum core capable of bending space-time itself. At its helm stood Captain Elena Vasquez, whose brilliance in unlocking the secrets of Erebus had made her one of humanity's greatest minds. The mission was clear: track the Zoryans back to their homeworld and dismantle their empire once and for all. Our journey began with the construction of the Gateway, a massive interstellar portal built using Eternum schematics. It allowed us to traverse vast distances in mere moments, opening pathways to star systems previously unreachable. Scouts ventured through first, mapping out routes and gathering intelligence on Zoryan strongholds. What they found was both terrifying and exhilarating. The Zoryans were not invincible. Their empire, vast as it was, showed signs of strain. Resistance movements had sprung up on worlds they had conquered, species inspired by humanity's defiance rising against their oppressors. The Zoryans' resources were stretched thin, their fleets scattered across countless systems as they struggled to maintain control. And at the heart of it all lay their homeworld, Zorathis, a planet shrouded in darkness and fortified beyond imagination. It was there that we would strike. The assault on Zorathis was humanity's greatest gamble, a battle that would either cement our place among the stars or end in our extinction. The fleet assembled at the gateway was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. Thousands of ships ranging from sleek fighters to massive carriers, each armed with weapons capable of tearing through Zoryan defenses. Among them flew vessels crewed by former Zoryan slaves, aliens who had joined our cause after witnessing our fight for freedom. As we approached Zorathis, the scale of what we faced became clear. The planet was surrounded by orbital defenses, massive stations armed with energy cannons that could obliterate entire fleets. Swarms of drones patrolled its skies, while its surface bristled with anti-aircraft batteries and shield generators powered by geothermal energy. But we were ready. The battle began with a coordinated strike on the orbital defenses. Waves of fighters darted through enemy fire, dodging plasma beams as they targeted weak points in the station's armor. Bombers followed close behind, delivering payloads that erupted into blinding explosions visible even from space. On board the Monroe, Vasquez directed the assault with surgical precision, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Focus fire on Sector 7, she ordered as holographic displays lit up with data from across the battlefield. "We need those shields down before Phase 2. Phase 2 was where things got personal. Ground forces descended onto Zorathis in drop pods designed to pierce through its defenses. Among them were soldiers equipped with exosuits powered by Eternum cores, walking tanks capable of taking on entire battalions single-handedly. They were joined by resistance fighters from across the galaxy, aliens who had suffered under Zoryan rule, now fighting for their freedom alongside humanity. I was among those ground forces, a journalist turned soldier who had traded my pen for a rifle when Earth fell under siege. As our pod hurtled toward the surface, I couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was it, the moment we'd been fighting for since that first crack appeared in Earth's sky. The landing was brutal. Anti-aircraft fire tore through our ranks as we touched down amidst a wasteland scarred by centuries of war. But we pressed on, pushing toward our objective, the Nexus, a massive structure at the planet's core housing the Zoryan central command and power source. Inside the Nexus, we faced horrors beyond imagination, biomechanical monstrosities designed to crush any who dared oppose their creators. But for every soldier who fell, two more took their place, driven by sheer determination and an unyielding belief in our cause. At last, we reached the core, a chamber pulsating with energy where the Zoryans' leaders awaited us. They were not what I expected, tall, gaunt beings whose arrogance radiated like heat from their translucent skin. "You cannot win," one of them hissed as we stormed into the chamber. "Your kind is weak, divided." "Not anymore," Vasquez replied coldly before activating the Shatterer. The device emitted a pulse that disrupted their energy fields, leaving them vulnerable for the first time in millennia. What followed was not just a battle, but an execution, a reckoning for every life they had taken and every world they had destroyed. When it was over, when the core lay in ruins and Zorathis burned behind us, we stood together beneath an alien sky and felt something none of us could put into words: triumph. Humanity had done more than survive. We had risen above our fears and limitations to become something greater, a force capable not only of defending itself, but also of shaping its destiny among the stars. As we returned home aboard the Monroe, I looked out at the endless expanse of space stretching before us and realized this was only the beginning. We were no longer just inhabitants of Earth, we were citizens of the galaxy. And though there would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, I knew one thing for certain: humanity would never again be afraid to face them head-on.